Hi, I'm Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation, and I'm happy that I did. This topic today is important, and what my role has been for the last over 20 years is so important for this topic, which is what is the cost of marriage counseling, and will it help fix my marriage? I used to be a divorce mediator, which means that all of my clients, virtually all of my clients, came from marriage counseling. Now, that means that the people who I met with didn't benefit from going to marriage counseling. And when I dug deeper, this is over 20 years ago, I found that hardly anyone benefits from marriage counseling. I imagine there's a few. And then I heard an NPR report on the radio, and they said that less than 5% of the people succeed in saving their marriages when they go to marriage counseling. I heard all the excuses. Oh, they came too late. Oh, they weren't compatible, blah, 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 blah. No. That isn't the truth. I shifted my practice then. That's why we founded the Marriage Foundation. Because I realized that as a whole group, marriage counselors who practice what they learned from Western psychology don't understand marriage, much less how to save them. As a group, they have a higher divorce rate than most people. Now, what is the real cost of marriage counseling? And will it help fix your marriage? I'm going to explain to you why they cannot. And I'm going to tell you what the real cost of marriage counseling ultimately is: your marriage, your happiness, and the reasons why you got married. Marriage, let's talk about marriage a little bit. And look, it's not their fault. Don't misunderstand me. I've trained many marriage counselors into our way of helping marriages, and those people really understand marriage. But most of those people just refer people to the Marriage Foundation, who then take a course or maybe just read one of my books if their marriage isn't in serious trouble, although most are. So let's talk about marriage. Let's go all the way back so you have the same understanding that I have, because I don't want to sell you. I want to share with you the realities. Think of marriage as a vehicle, that what it takes you to together is love, unconditional love, marital love, and happiness, ever increasing happiness. Every single day, your marriage is supposed to produce ever increasing happiness. Isn't that why you got married? Now, we never talk about this. Again, because there's no education about marriage. Not even about relationships, not even about ourselves. So you get into this vehicle. Let's pretend it's a plane, okay? And you and your spouse, your husband or your wife, are co-pilots. Now, some people who are spiritual minded say God is our co-pilot, but it's sort of like an excuse at that point for their failures. You have to know how to drive it. So what happens? You get into your plane, you get married, you have a big party at the reception, you exchange your vows. It's very beautiful. You could feel the love. You could feel the joy. People are saying, oh, they're going to make it, they're going to make it. And now you're running into trouble. Why? Because neither of you were flying the plane. You got in the plane and it started going down. And you looked at each other. And then you started pointing the finger at each other. It's your fault, it's your fault. Or let's make it real now. Maybe there's infidelity. Maybe there's constant fighting. Maybe there's constant bickering. Maybe there's tension. You're not having sex in your marriage. You're not feeling what you signed up for in your marriage. And now, because we're all trained to go to marriage counselors, society trains us to go to marriage counselors, you start looking for a good marriage counselor, right? They're nice people. It's not going to be hard to find a nice marriage counselor, but they don't understand marriage. They don't even understand what I just mentioned, that you signed up for marriage for two main purposes. I call them the promises of marriage. Number one, ever-increasing happiness, which if you were flying your plane, if you knew how to be married, that's what you have. There's a mechanical component to everything in life. Material things, spiritual things, and marriage is a very spiritual thing, and you should be happy all the time. The other thing is you should be feeling love to the degree that it's blowing your mind, that you are so happy, that your heart is opened up, but you don't know how. If you go to marriage counselors and you ask them what is love, and you could look this up. What is love? Look it up, Google it, go ahead. It'll tell you it's an emotion of heightened like. But that's nonsense. But they avoid any topic that sounds spiritual because they're quote unquote scientific. Well, spirituality is scientific too. Just because you can't see it, you can't touch it, etc., doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, years ago, they didn't know that light was waves, that sound were waves, that atoms and protons and neutrons existed. Science isn't caught up. It doesn't understand. It will someday, but it doesn't now. In the meantime, here are these people who want to help you, and they're sincere, and so they hit you with things like, well, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your siblings. Tell me about your history as an individual. Well, what difference does that make? If you learn how to be married, then because you have free will, you apply what you now know. Now, there is this component of the mind you have to contend with. And again, they don't know. When I first started training therapists, I thought, okay, we'll get through the mind stuff really quick. So I put a diagram of how the mind works on the whiteboard, because that's where I always started with my clients when I shifted my practice. And it's where I start with the course for men and the course for women. It's critical. You have to understand how you are, what you are. You're a composite. Your body, you have a body. Mind, you have a mind. And soul, you are the soul. And the soul is pure love. And so you have to understand how the mind works and how it messes you up until you gain mastery over it. So that's like the first step. The very first step should be learning how to gain mastery over your mind. Otherwise, and tell me if this isn't true, your philosophies are cool, but you don't behave in accordance with your philosophies. Hardly anyone does. Why? Because we don't know how to operate our mind. We don't watch our mind. We don't recognize that it is a possession. Most people just take for granted effectively that they are their mind. So when I worked with my clients before the courses, I would explain, look, you're not your mind. You have a mind. But your mind is controlled because you're not in charge. You, the soul, are not taking control. Your mind is controlled by your body's drive to survive. This is very scientific stuff. The Marriage Foundation is cutting edge because I discovered these things and nobody else is even looking in these places. They're talking about honoring your emotions, learning how to argue. It's insane that you should argue in your marriage. You shouldn't. So what is the cost of going to marriage counseling? Traditional marriage counseling is going to discourage you. It's going to waste your time and effort, and your marriage is going to keep sliding down, and eventually you're going to get a divorce. That's the real cost. You know, people write into us. We have a free service at the Marriage Foundation. You could write to our counselors. You just go to our website and you click on Ask a Counselor. It's free. And people ask us, how much is your counseling? Well, I used to know the answers, and people would go, are you on a panel? Well, our counselors are not on a panel. They wouldn't dare tell you that you should see a marriage counselor. Because we want to save your marriage. We want to help you. And if you go to marriage counseling, even their protocols are not consistent. Even their philosophies about marriage are not consistent. Some people write into us, well, what about same-sex marriage? Well, we don't care, because the basis of marriage is love. You got married in order. Here's a great illustration. You've gone to weddings. We've all gone to weddings. And there is this moment when the couple is exchanging vows, yours too, when you just feel this, this explosion in your heart. Now, if you think about it and you recall, when you had that, you enjoyed it, but just for the briefest second, because then the mind steps in and goes, no, that's not real. You have to have that. That is real. That is why you got married. That is what you want. You don't want that hidden in a cave in your heart. You want your heart opened. So you and your soulmate are experiencing this love constantly, not just when you're having sex, not just when you're eating a special dinner, not just when you're having coffee together, but constant love should rule your marriage. And what brings more happiness than love? Nothing. So the topic is, what is the cost of marriage counseling, and will it help fix my marriage? The answer is the cost of marriage counseling could very well be your marriage. Now, people who sign up for our course, they fill out an intake form and we ask, have you tried before to fix your marriage? Many say, yes, we tried marriage counseling, but we didn't get anywhere. It helped a little. It almost ruined our marriage. We get all kinds of things. The worst cost is that you lose hope. You don't realize anymore that healing your marriage is not so difficult. It's really not what they make it out to be. We don't need to know your histories. We don't need to know your proclivities. We don't need to know if you have issues with tension or anger, or all these things. They go away when you know how to drive your marriage. So the cost is very, very high. What difference does it make in terms of dollars and cents what it costs if it's worse than throwing your money away? If it's paying for poison that will contribute more toxic feelings to your marriage. And will it help fix my marriage? No, it won't. And I'm speaking as someone who used to benefit from marriages falling apart. I made a tremendously good living as a divorce mediator. It's expensive to get a divorce. Even if you save money by going to a divorce mediator, but the costs are much more than monetary. Please look into what we have. The philosophies, the understanding, so you could see it's so real. It's so real. It's not this, oh, thank God I don't have a background in Western psych. I've looked into it, I've studied it, but I realize so much of it is just utter nonsense. You know, everyone who's touched upon Western psychology is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I looked at that too. It's utterly nonsensical. It's ridiculous. It's quasi on track, but not really, because it deals with our emotions, with our emotional needs. Well, you learn from us, and you'll realize emotions are like little software programs in the mind. They talk about honoring them. You should not honor your emotions any more than you should honor your software programs in your computer. You use them. But they end up using us when we don't learn how to master our mind. Look, the reason I formed the Marriage Foundation is because a friend of mine, I used to give talks at Second Saturday divorce support group for women, and a friend of mine used to be a Navy SEAL, and he became a divorce mediator to a good lawyer, great guy. And he said, Paul, this stuff is outrageous. And he wrote out a check for $1,000. He said, let's get this turned into a foundation. Okay. And that's what happened. So we're here to serve you. We're a nonprofit foundation. So if you want to donate, you can. I'm not pitching you. I'm not like that. I don't pitch people for things like this. Truthfully, I trust in God. And if that scares you away, so be it. But I think God wants us to be happy. And the proof of that is that He gave us free will, He gave us volition, and He gave us an awareness of happiness. You know, animals are happy too. I mean, you've seen dogs where they're like sitting on the porch and you know they're in doggy bliss, right? But they don't really know that. We as human beings are a very special creation. We know happiness. And we don't need to get it from the outside. God gave us all the equipment to be happy on a constant basis. All of this ties back into marriage. He also gave us marriage for our happiness. God loves us for God's sake and for ours. Take advantage of those gifts that are right at your fingertips by learning how. And also, like this video, leave a comment if you will. Thank you for spending time with me. I'm Paul Friedman. I founded the Marriage Foundation. God bless you and take care.